Hi, everyone, and welcome to another Good Governance Academy event. We are just waiting for everybody to join. I know we see the people coming online. I know it is before the hour, but it just gives us a little bit of time to join. And in the meantime, I'm going to help us live stream to YouTube. We generally have about 2 to 5 people joining us on the YouTube while we also on the webinar, which is great. And I also bring the questions from YouTube through. So if you have people who are not able to join for whatever reason, the YouTube video live recording is available there if should ever you want to access it. But while you're online and while we're waiting for everybody to get online, please do pop in the chat. The chat function is open. Pop in the chat where you're from. Love to know where you're dialing in from. The reactions are open. So if you would like to, from Athens, lovely to see you. Thank you, George. Lovely to see you again. If you do like something that we're saying, or you like what the speakers are saying, please, the reaction buttons are open. Give us a heart, give us a clap, give us a laugh if it's something funny. Really love to see your reactions. We are going to be posting quite a lot in the chat function today. There's lots of papers, interesting articles, lots of news around the topic. As you know, it's such an important topic. So we're going to be posting a lot in the chat function. So then can I please ask that you put your questions in the Q&A box and using the Q&A function, because that allows us to find it a lot easier. But it is the top of the hour, and I'd like to then welcome everybody. First of all, I'd like to welcome Dr. Yvonne Katambo. And Dr. Yvonne is busy dialing in from Kenya, so she is in the dark, so please excuse her. She's in the dark already. But I'd like to hand over to Yvonne, who's actually the chair of the Ben Africa Networking Council. Yvonne, over to you.
Thank you, everyone, and greetings from Nairobi, Kenya. Greetings on behalf of my colleagues from Ben Africa. I'm so pleased and happy to join you this evening. My role really is to introduce the Business Ethics Network to you guys, and I will just go straight and in my own terms, I'll say the Business Ethics Network is an organization that brings together people who share the passion of business ethics in Africa. And we are a home of conversations around business ethics. And so, how we've structured these conversations, one of the main pillars is actually a discussion, a conversation like this, where we share ideas, we share a cup of coffee, we laugh together, and at the same time come up with solutions and insights that affect our day-to-day lives and that can bring change and transform our areas of our lives. Another key area that Ben Africa is quite interested and key to is the annual conferences, which we conduct every year. We have set aside in Kenya, when you say you have set aside, it's a term used by our president. And sometimes we complain that setting aside does not mean getting there. But Ben Africa has set aside the first week of November every year to have a conference that is bringing Africans together and friends of Africa to discuss and to have conversations around business ethics. And this year, we'll be holding our conference in Mauritius. And so I'll take this early opportunity and welcome everyone to log into Ben Africa and check us out. And it will be good to have that conversation. Last and not least, we have the Africa Journal that publishes the good work that our academia team is doing around Africa. And so if you are you are into publishing, please link with us so that we can share and publish those great papers that will be, of course, of great resource to upcoming academia teams in Africa, and will also want to be a resource to Africans who would want to go into data and, investing a lot in matters research. As I conclude, it will be good for me to say that Ben Africa took a key role in uh, conducting the global survey, business ethics survey last year in 2024. And the outcome is out there. Please check us out. And I would also want to welcome all of you to take part. Every time we see call for papers, we are ready to have these conversations with you. Thank you, Dr. Brian. I can see you, our president. A big shout out to you. My colleague, Ugi from Ben Africa. And once again, Carol, thank you so much for putting up such a wonderful and exciting session. We really look forward to an insightful session this evening. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. And so I'd also like to welcome our speakers today. First of all, we have Professor Prosper Simbarashe Magushu. Thank you very much for being here today. I'm just going to call you Simba. And we have, why am I not seeing a panel view, gallery view? There we go. And we have Dr. Anthony Casaboni. Let me just give you a brief rundown in terms of their bios. So you can see their bios on the web, on our website. You would have seen it. But let me just first of all start with Anthony. Anthony is a senior researcher at the University of Johannesburg Centre for Social Development in Africa, leading the social, economic, and environmental justice thematic area. And Simba is an assistant professor of law and projects manager at the Free University of Amsterdam. And he's specializing in financial crimes and international asset recovery from a human rights-based approach. So today's webinar is actually a very, very important topic, and that's innovative tech-enabled economic crime. And so it is, I think lots of people are worried about it. It is a scary area. So I would like to just, first of all, ask Simba to just give us an overview of this topic and provide us with a little bit of context. Thank you.
Well, hello, everyone. It's great to be here. And thank you so much, Caroline, for having me. And I hope you can hear me very clearly.
All good. Thank you.
Okay,
yes.
Fantastic. All right, and colleagues, I'm sure there are some of us in the audience who are also academics, and there is this disease in academia that whenever we find ourselves in a discussion of some sort, we always want to start with a definition, and please pardon me because I really cannot dispense with this necessity, especially so when we are discussing something controversial, corruption. You really need to make sure that we all agree, or at least there is consensus, or we agree to disagree on exactly what it is that we are talking about. This is a field that is prone to be, discussed in the context of anecdotes and juicy stories. So, but what I'll do today to save you from the boring academic discussions, I just want our audience to keep at the back of their minds that corruption itself is something that we cannot really pin down to a specific definition. And with that, and you soon find out
Simba, we're losing you. It must have been that definition problem. So you're back now.
Yes.
Can you just start with the definition again for us?
Okay, now again. All right. So what?
But sorry, just to interrupt, you're dialing in from Indonesia, aren't you?
Indeed, I'm dialing in from Indonesia. I'm connecting from my mobile phone. So I'm really keeping my fingers crossed that you are going to have me throughout the are going to be in and out.
So we won't be offended if you turn your camera off if you are battling with bandwidth.
Oh, so that if that's going to help, let me just do that. All right. And there we go.
Fabulous. So
I see
please give
already
us a
some-
definition. We're all on tender hooks now.
All right. I think you probably missed that part. As I said,
Yes, we did.
really bother you with the, classroom kind of definition. But what I want you to keep, what I want our audience to keep at the back of their mind is that corruption is always ever changing. And especially for the subject that we are going, in the context of procurement, also water procurement. So there is this misconception or its old-fashioned way of thinking that corruption always happens behind closed doors and drawn curtains. But you will see that in lowly governed states, and those states that are quite corrupt, are regarded as perceived to be highly corrupt. Corruption can also happen in broad daylight. Yeah. So, and then with that in mind, I also want you to think of, for those who may be from the 80s or so, back in the days when it was quite difficult to reconnect with your friends before Facebook, before AI, and now how easier it is, Facebook, AI, and intelligence in general has helped us now to easily connect, easily move money at the speed of internet. Keep that at the back of your mind. And this old-fashioned misconception that corruption usually happens behind closed doors and drawn curtains, that it always happens in secrecy. This is one thing that I just wanted to demystify before we get into our conversation. The corruption, under certain circumstances, in certain low-governed states, it actually happens in broad daylight and sometimes is regarded as necessary, to get things to happen, as the grease that wheels and that oils the wheels of industry and commerce. So that's just the part that I want our audience to keep at the back of their mind. But I'm not going to bother to bore you with classic definitions or to ask you to what does corruption mean. So that was just the one thing that I wanted us to dispense with before we get into today's talk. Thank you, Carol, and also our audience for your patience.
Thank you so much, Simba. And perhaps, Anthony, you would like to add something to that.
Yes, many thanks to the auditors, to the organizers of the event, and it's a fascinating topic. When I got the invitation, I didn't know where I'd start. And as a social justice activist, somebody who's very passionate about ensuring that society becomes a fairer space for everyone, where sustainable development can happen, where inequality can be obliterated. It's a challenge when we think about, systemic corruption, and as indicated by Prosper, it happens everywhere, whether it's in a state space or it's private sector actors manipulating the markets. It happens. The global south, where we are, and if we draw a straight line across the globe, it's generally the southern hemisphere. And as I'm talking from South Africa, coming from as well another African state. I'm Zimbabwean by nationality. I understand, the implications and impacts of corruption. But I won't only talk about corruption, but I'll talk about what I have now conceptualized in the coming work that I'm doing as the triple challenge, which is structural inequality, which is heightened, issues around poverty, extreme poverty, as well as unemployment. So these are challenges that the Global South is generally experiencing. And in other cases, there are also issues around conflict and war. So these are conditions where economic crime flourishes. Being an African and being Pan-African, I always believe that we can end some of these problems we have internally. But if one thinks about the nature and the amount of money we receive in terms of aid, the United Nations knows that it's around 30 to 50 billion United States dollars. And if you look at illicit financial flows, about 90 billion exits the country, the continent. So some questions we need to start thinking, do we really need aid, and what is it that we can leverage within the current space? And we talk about being in the new era, the era of the fourth industrial revolution. We can have a separate discussion about whether we really are in the fourth industrial revolution and what these technologies are. But in short, we're talking about machine learning, we're talking about AI, we're talking about the Internet of Things, cloud computing, these plethora of technologies that on one end can be used to mitigate the gaps, around inequality. And on the other, if not used responsibly, they can exacerbate those. So this discussion is quite interesting because it's for us. It's not just about efficiency. It's about using technology to uphold rights and to start looking at how we can do things differently and possibly from my end not only look at technologies what could be used to combat crime, but technologies that can be used to combat crime. So yeah.
Thank you, Anthony. While you've got the mic, a question for you. How are the technologies that you mentioned? Perhaps let me throw in blockchain there as well, AI and blockchain. How have you seen them actually be used to, let's say, counter the tech-enabled economic crime? Let's look at transparency and accountability.
So imagine if we had a ledger system that every entry was documented and could not be changed. Imagine if we had a system that was incredibly difficult to penetrate. So when we talk about these blockchain systems, we're talking about a ledger that's very difficult to manipulate, if not almost impossible. So through this, we can have very transparent governance and acquisition processes. In South Africa, at a national level, we talk about tenderpreneurial activities. We talk about corruption within the way government operates. If we were to roll out, for example, these blockchain systems within that front, they could help us. And you'll note also in some of the work that I've done with my good colleague and dear friend, Dr. Radulovic, we note how these technologies can also be used to blow the whistle, because in the country, in South Africa, whistleblowers are killed. People die for disclosing certain indiscretions and corrupt activities. So where somebody can blow the whistle anonymously through blockchain system and find ways of even incentivizing it, where people who make certain disclosures cannot be identified in how they would have done it. So not only are we saying we can use blockchain to strengthen, to bolster the procurement processes that countries have, we're saying also, I am saying also, we can use blockchain to ensure that people who do come forth can do so without fear, and work out a way in which we incentivize the people, such that they can make those disclosures. Yeah.
I'm going to ask a difficult question now. Sorry, not one prepared. But I often find, for example, just in budgeting, using a budgeting tool and trying to sell budgeting software. I always found that companies didn't want to buy budgeting software. Well, the people who were asked to buy the software, which are the financial people, said, yes, we like the tool, we need the tool. But the people who had the say, in actually making the decision really didn't want to be held accountable, so didn't really promote the purchasing of the budgeting tool because it would bring more transparency to the process. So actually trying to sell a budgeting tool to a company is incredibly difficult. Can you imagine now trying to get a blockchain scenario being sold into the government, and the government then saying that this is the way we do procurement is with blockchain? Have you actually seen any instances where they have used a blockchain kind of solution?
At a national level, no. But I'll talk more about the people involved in the decision-making processes. In South Africa, we experienced what was called state capture. I'm not sure what different countries call it. In some instances, people look at it as a normal. But this is when the state is exposed to outside influences and decisions made around around the operations of the state driven by personal interest. And this was primarily through the Guptas. And the government, the state, through the public protector, would commission an inquiry into what happened, the Zondo Commission. During this, the height of state capture, the country lost 1.5 trillion rands. I understand that we may not know because we're talking from different countries, right? So you're thinking, okay, what does that mean? This is what it means. For a country with a population of just over 65 million, the annual budget of 2024 to 2025 was 220 billion. So this is about 6 times much. We lost 6 times our annual budget in a way we can't explain. That's a crisis. So if we're able, as a country, as countries, to ensure that we do have, through formal democratic processes, because the height of corruption is always when there are dictatorial tendencies and when there's unscrupulous tendencies. And in the other work, the other article I wrote again with Dr. Radulovic, we make a case of how, in our case, the government of national unity in South Africa, can find ways, speaking to policy, can find ways of ensuring that these processes and the adoption of human rights and ethical processes happens. So it's about ensuring that there is good governance. And good governance is very, very essential. And unfortunately, on the continent, we do have a leadership crisis that's dating back, for example, from my country of origin, 4 decades. And it doesn't obliterate, opportunities. There are always opportunities. And we now need to start having meaningful discussions, on various platforms and various groupings on how we can hold people accountable. And it starts by ensuring that, we have voices.
Absolutely.
Yeah, back to you.
Thank you, Anthony. Okay, moving to Simba then, just on that point around using 4IR technologies like AI and blockchain, Simba, have you got any additions that you'd like to make to our discussion?
Yes, thank you, Caro. I was listening very tentatively to my colleague, brother Anthony, and he challenged the audience to imagine, use their imagination, having robust systems in place. But I want to push them a little bit further and say, don't just imagine. Yeah, go and read your Bill of Rights, constitutions, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. You're going to find out that there is a right, fundamental right to transparency and accountability. So these two are not privileges, mere privileges. These are duties that are owed to us by those in power, public office, but also by those who control multi-millions, those who are in business. They are also now supposed to comply with fundamental rights such as transparency and accountability. Now, to answer the question, how can we then harness and use AI to fight corruption? We should stop looking at corruption simply as a mere violation of criminal laws, because otherwise then the burden is simply on the law enforcement, the prosecutor to pursue, the corrupt guys and those of few scruples. If we take a human rights-based approach to fighting corruption, that opens the door wide open enough for us to also then demand accountability and transparency, and thereby importing duty-free AI into this fight against corruption. We are not just mere spectators, but we should also play a role in fighting corruption. So far, treating corruption merely as a crime is not taking us anywhere. In fact, some countries are backsliding, more corrupted than they were a decade ago or so. That's just my small contribution on this point, but I think Anthony has
Brilliant
done
point.
some justice to this. Yeah.
And okay, let's swing it across then, while you've got the mic, let's swing it across then to the actual ways that criminals use and Simba, if I can keep you on the call, how do criminals use these emerging technologies to commit the economic crime? So we've spoken about, you know, the governments and, you know, trying to put the mechanisms in place from a anti-corruption mechanism, but how do criminals actually, how are they using it now?
Yes, I really wish I knew, really, Caroline. Criminals, you see, the thing is, there are infinity, a number of ways in which criminals can use AR. Criminals they are always a step ahead.
Innovative.
Good guys, yeah, in fighting corruption. But what I know quite certainly, what I can say with authority and certainty, I know AI technologies, they give this anonymity that is not available easily if you're not hiding behind a keyboard. So I don't know how many of you they have received emails that they can inherit millions of dollars and so forth and so on, or emails pretending to be coming from quite eminent people. Yeah, so they hide behind fake names to perpetrate crimes. And not so surprisingly, quite a large number of people have actually fallen for this. And also, one of the reasons we're fighting now, for some of us who have been fighting financial crimes, is to actually try to get the secrecy, pierce that veil of secrecy that even certain countries, financial institutions, they still protecting jealously, guiding jealously. So anonymity is another number one enemy when it comes to fighting crime, because you don't know who is behind this shell company, who is behind even this legitimate company. Criminals also sometimes diversify into legitimate businesses. And then there is also the issue of money laundering. Internet has allowed money to move at the speed of internet. So profits from criminal activities are plowed back into committing further crimes, thereby creating this vicious cycle. So those are among many other different areas in which criminals have been using technology to further perpetrating their criminal activities. But honestly, there are endless ways in which criminals have been using AI and technology to perpetrate crime. So therefore, it's very important to note that this is a double-edged sword. Yeah, so it can also have both negative and positive effect when it comes to the fight against corruption.
So I think this is a good point that's been raised by Hilda in the Q&A, and it's something that I'll give to you, Anthony. It's her observation that corruption is perpetuated, whatever. Say that again.
Tongue twisting.
Perpetrated. Perpetrated, I think is what, okay, by the educated elite who have access to the systems and power as opposed to the less privileged and unemployed. That's quite a significant statement. I'm not sure if that's correct. Do you have anything to say on that? And because it talks about, you have, Simba, but let's just ask Anthony first.
So I would be very mindful of solely looking at access to education and access to tools. I think it's an access to some form of resource, and this might not necessarily be education. So looking again at technologies that can be manipulated to perpetuate crime, bringing it back to what Simba said, blockchain, because it's untraceable, you have vast amounts of money and wealth being moved in cryptocurrency, right? They're being moved.
Yes,
And,
yes.
we've gotten to a stage where there are deep fakes, voice cloning, and, give you a classical example. The image behind me is Anthony the Prince, the African prince who's got a pet lion Simba, no offense, and his name is Simba. So overnight, with these technologies, we're now surviving in a world where reality in itself and authenticity can be questioned. What is real? I saw a video of Anthony talking. Is this Anthony? Is it me?
It looks like you.
So it looks like me, and that is it. So again, when we look at, these advanced technology, there is an aspect of people possessing certain skills, hacking into systems, defrauding, whether it's a bank or these public utility companies with an enormous amount of wealth. Yes, these things are happening. Yeah.
Thank you. Simba, was you dying to add to that?
Yes, really, because I remember I was at pains in the beginning. I felt also a little bit stupid trying to first define what corruption is. Yeah, so now it comes to hand. So I think there was a general statement made there that corruption is what perpetrated by those top drawer criminals. Those are the where decisions are made. But again, that's why it's very important that when we talk about a subject such as corruption, we need to distinguish it, at least try to unpack it and declassify, categorize it. Yeah. So, again, I don't want to get too technical, but we have grant corruption. Yeah. Grant corruption involving lots of money. Yeah. This happens where decisions are made. So when we look in the context of water procurement, what in many other countries, to the best of my knowledge, except the United States, I think in most countries, this is a public utility. It's the government that provides clean water. It's now a fundamental right since 2010. We now have the right to water, clean water. We didn't have a right to clean water until 2010. Thank God we now have it. But my point is this: at the point where decisions are made, this is where grant corruption occurs. So these are the guys who decides who gets the contract to supply water, to clean water, and so forth. And it happened. I wanted to avoid naming and shaming, but in Zimbabwe in 2008, there was corruption in the government at the top level, grant corruption. The minister then ended up awarding this contract to his cronies, who did not know nothing about cleaning and purifying water. And as a result, direct result of this corruption, of this scandal, water wasn't cleaned properly, and there was an outbreak of cholera, which killed more than 2,000 people and made hundreds of thousands others to fall sick. So this is corruption at the grant level. But we also have, those guys who are at meeting the public at the administrative level. So this is administrative corruption, also sometimes called petty corruption. But this is also very important. Yeah? We have this guy who be in a village somewhere, and this is the guy who is responsible to open or close the water tap. And he can sometimes get corrupted. Yeah? For many reasons. Sometimes he hasn't received any salary in the past 3 months or so.
It's a powerful position.
Yes, so that puts him in a powerful position, whereby he can now decide who gets to get access to water first. Yeah, and that's petty corruption, but that's still very important, and also can cause some serious damage. Imagine he does not give access to an old lady who doesn't have enough to bribe, even have 50 cents or $1 to bribe this guy. So corruption, we have to distinguish it, different level where it is committed, even within this context of in the water sector, procurement, or provision. Yeah. So there's grant corruption, there's petty corruption. Why it's important that we distinguish it into these different categories is because then the solutions that we should offer are also quite different. Yeah? For grant corruption, basically, even if you improve the salaries, these are people who are already rich by any standards. And they are greedy, they are committing crimes because they are greedy, or they are beholden to a system that put them in place. So different solutions are needed to curb this kind of corruption. And in some cases, just giving this small or little village officer his salaries at appropriate time and adequate enough for him to live a decent life will also curb these corrupt tendencies. Yeah.
Yes.
Different
he doesn't need blockchain.
Yes. That's just the point I wanted to mention, that at least technology also can help, at least whistleblowers. They could also just report, this is what is happening at point B in this rural area. We don't have access to clean water on the right time, although it says that water should be free. We are forced here to pay 10 cents every time we go there to to collect, or we are always forced to contribute to repairing of some machines or things like that. They always justify it with, corruption is the most easily justifiable offense. Yeah. So, but the point I'm trying to emphasize here is that we need to look at corruption, to look at it from different, its different classification, so that we can offer appropriate solutions. Okay, but general statements like, okay, only top drawer guys are the ones who are responsible for corruption in the water management system will not be much helpful. So then we distinguish it into its different categories that can help us to then tailor-make solutions and also design appropriate technology to curb different types of corruption.
That's so important. I think it just reminds me of the working in information security. Information really has to be classified, because you don't want the top tier security systems at X million rand dollars to protect it if it's not confidential information, if you can access it publicly. So it's important to have the right tools and apply the right appropriate technologies and appropriate expenses to deal with the different levels of information security. And you're saying it's the same is true here, is that you really need to you need to classify your economic crime first. And I think that's really important. There's lots of, getting lots of questions is great. If I can just ask everybody online, if you can just up arrow the ones that you would like is most important to be asked. Otherwise, I'm just going to go sequentially through them. And here's one from Kerry Anthony that you're online. Is industry at a social level better able to address crime and corruption than governments? Perhaps because governments are too encumbered by politics. Do you think that the industry or the private sector is better able to combat corruption?
So I don't think that's entirely correct. I think what we need to look at and reflect on are the spaces in which corruption happens. There's a misconception that South Africa has become rampantly and abundantly corrupt in the post-apartheid era, which actually isn't correct. We need to understand that corruption is also there in the private sector. So beyond establishing which sectors corruption has taken over and where it's more corrupt, I think there's a bigger call for us as people to reflect on our humanity. It's worrying for me that, state officials, for example, swear to abide by the Batopeli principles. And, it's even worrying for me that have called for this event to discuss how to, understand economic crime and how to leverage technology to combat it, because people aren't just being responsible. So beyond the tools that we have, it's more around us now starting to reimagine, what humanity is, getting back to the basics and asking ourselves to conform and abide by, just decent principles and humanity. In South Africa, we talk about Ubuntu. In Zimbabwe, we talk about UN. So where is all of this? Why is it that we're having these discussions? So there's a moral bankruptcy, and this is what's now prevalent. It's now about who has money, where's the conspicuous consumption, how do I look? So I think the call should be inward. It should be inward. What is it that we need to do things different?
Before we go spending millions on solutions. And I guess it's a bit like taking medication to address the symptoms, and you're not looking at the root cause. Interesting. I watched dare I say it, a video on Instagram, really about the Chinese government talking about their major shift from being kind of a developing economy, a third world environment, and raising the community up into a first world environment. And they were saying the one thing was the infrastructure and making sure that the infrastructure was able to translate from or migrate from being third world infrastructure into a first world kind of infrastructure. But far more difficult was it to bring and to instill a first world culture in the people, as opposed to in the communities, as opposed to a third world culture. And they just used examples such as littering, urinating in stairwells, in buildings, and squatting in buildings and things like that. And it's that broken window syndrome. It's actually trying to shift the culture from one of being a third world culture into more of a first world culture. But before I take any more questions, I'd like to just, Simba, now that I'm seeing you online, here's one is really about a question on cross sector collaboration. Government, business, civil society playing an ethical role in ethical use of technology, and I guess in terms of this webinar, the ethical use of technology to combat economic crime. Can you maybe just give us some insight into that?
Oh, yeah. Thank you again, Caroline, for this good question. So again, from a human rights-based approach, fighting corruption, we also need to be ethical in our fight. Corruption is also one crime that can easily be politicized. Yeah. So there is in most, again, lowly governed states and those highly perceived corrupt societies, there is corruption of anti-corruption, where you see anti-corruption mechanisms such as courts, captured courts, being used to go against political opponents, anti-corruption commissions, anti-corruption laws being twisted in a way to make those who are now out of favor of those in power in pursuing them. So we need to be very ethical in fighting corruption. So the answer again here is in any other issues that I've highlighted, or the other issues I've highlighted earlier. Should be addressed from a human rights based approach. We have procedures under international human rights law that can be employed to deal or address crimes in our societies. Yeah, so we should follow due processes of law. Yeah? So this means we should afford those are suspected or accused of perpetrating any criminal activities, including corruption, a fair chance to also get representation and also tell the other side of the story. Yeah. Not just jailing them without any option or to appear or to be heard, something that we have seen happening. And also that's, you see that in many countries, former presidents or presidents are, if sitting presidents, heads of state, they are removed under the guise of fighting corruption. And then a few months later, corruption even becomes even much more worse than it was under the removed president. So this is the other side. But having said that, this is not without prejudice also to using AI and also other mechanisms where corruption is manifest. Like, you go on social media, you see somebody who is spending lots of money that cannot be, but the source of which cannot be explained. That's why we have also under international law, international treaties such as the United Nations Convention Against Corruption. It also makes it an option to allow states to also allow under certain circumstances, a shift from the traditional human rights approach that only the state should prove an accused person beyond a reasonable doubt that they have committed corruption. You reverse the burden and then allow or give an opportunity to the suspected person to prove to the authorities how they acquired so much wealth. Yeah. So if you use AI these days, I've seen some interesting examples of how monitoring social media has revealed and certain unexplained wealth, leading even to convictions. So this is one way of looking at AI. Yeah. First of all, you need, in terms of ethics, I would say go straight ahead and just employ, respect the rights also of the accused people, even when designing and also implementing technology in the fight against corruption, because it's easy to instrumentalize or corrupt anti-corruption mechanisms. And then I don't want to pretend, and then I'll shut up. I don't want to pretend like I know everything on this point. There are also some areas where I still have questions, and I would also want to ask the audience. I see they are quite active in the chat. What do you think of leaks? Yeah? It's very difficult, for instance, to find out some of this information. If you have ever heard about the Panama leaks, Luanda leaks, and several others, they have reviewed so much, thousands of documents have been reviewed in a short time, probably, and I guess using technology. But this information cannot be used in a court of law if we are to use the human rights-based approach, because this has been acquired illegally, hacking into computers of the bad guys. Of course, it can be used in the court of public opinion, but I want to ask, so all those who have been, after the Panama Papers, even the law firm itself was acquitted on a technicality. The evidence cannot be used because it was acquired illegally. So in this case, I also want to give back this to the audience. I cannot pretend to know everything. What do you think we should do in such a case where we have now this fight between the right to privacy, freedom from
or
corruption?
surveillance? Yes,
Yes,
or surveillance. So it really,
yes.
it's a collective effort. It takes a collective effort to really bring this all
Yeah.
to bear. Anthony, to you, around how can policymakers and regulators stay ahead of this curve, of all of these, the rapidly evolving digital landscape? We're going to try and work on the culture of things, but how do you stay ahead of the use of technology? I'm just looking at, the power sector and bringing down power grids, and it's being weaponized, not only an economic crime, but truly weaponized. But how do you think the public sector can stay ahead?
So I think first and foremost, piggybacking on what Simba mentioned earlier, the question about, who's involved in these discussions and how. What I like about South Africa is that there's a very vibrant civil society, and this acts as a watchdog. So a lot of these revelations that have come up around, poor administration, corruption, and etc., they've been through, CSOs and, their activities. And, it's about the public sector working with the private sector. It's about, these discussions we're having, with a platform created by NPOs, how us researchers can start doing the research and our findings are used to inform policy. And the biggest disjuncture we have as researchers is that the kind of work we do ultimately ends up shelved in a library. Then it used to be, in physical form where it gathers dust. But now they're shelved in these clouds and no one reads them.
Well, why is it being shelved?
Well, policymakers don't consult. And when we do have discussions with them, our recommendations aren't considered at all. So, classical example is, issues around, which is also linked to the work that I do. What explains the health crisis in South Africa? If you ask any lay, the reason is, there's, there are undocumented migrants who are burdening the system. But a closer inspection will show you, all of these issues around poor administration, shortage of skills that has to do with, that's linked to higher education, the, poor outcomes, poor numbers of doctors coming in, the doctor-patient ratio in South Africa is astronomical. It's got, the failing healthcare system or poor service delivery has got nothing to do with immigrants, for example. But
and that's not just South Africa. We heard recently now in the UK blaming the boat people for the NHS system. Same thing. Yeah.
So it's this scapegoating that's existing. It's this ignoring of empirical research. It's the work that's being done that's not being considered. So there needs to be more discussions around what we're doing. And instead of, Simba and Anthony having this discussion, let's have state stakeholders, let's have government. Let's ask them, why is it that, Eskom is in crisis? why is it that, according to the Auditor General's reports, a significant number of municipalities, don't have clean audits? Where is the money? Where is the money? So we need to have those questions. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's something at the Good Governance Academy we're very aware of. So that's why we've launched the Journal on Advances in Corporate Governance. Not so much just corporate governance, but it's around critical business issues. And the reason why we've done that is to bring academia together with practitioners. But I must tell you that the practitioners that have tried to submit editorial papers to the journal, it's been really problematic for them to do all the checks and balances required for submitting a paper to a journal. So it's prohibitive on both sides. On the one side, we have the public at large consuming content that's really easy to consume, in sound bites. We don't even read news articles anymore. We look at the top 3 bullet points, right? And on the other side, academia making it really difficult for the Joe public to actually access and to read and to be able to interpret that learning. So I just want to take Annette's question here. If it's so difficult now, Annette is saying, would the presenters, I'm going to turn to you, Simba, support self-regulation by tech companies? In other words, allow tech companies to put their own guardrails on. And I guess we're talking big tech, Google, Amazon, Facebook, Meta, or perhaps something more hybrid that involves tech, local communities, and government agencies. And in terms of reining in economic crime online, who has the skills and capacities to respond?
Yeah. Yeah, I think also
It's the tech companies, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, well, difficult question, but of course, sometimes I also believe the best gamekeeper is a reformed poacher. Yeah. Yes, but it's at the moment, at this juncture in time, it is quite challenging to think of who are the reformed gamekeepers in the tech industry. They are all fighting hard to become the next trillion-dollar companies. Yeah, they are more focused on profits, maximizing on their profits, and that leaves us with no choice. Instead of being mere spectators and climbing, going on social media and all that, we should also now be responsible for policing, and we are also gatekeepers, beginning with professionals. Yeah, before we even move on to other members of the community, let's look at the professionals, so-called gatekeepers, who are working in tandem with these phony capitalists and crooked politicians. Yeah, we now have 3 sectors. We have the public sector, we have the private sector, we have the criminal sector as well. Yeah? So we now need to, so we need, I think there's a little bit feedback. Sorry, I got.
That's absolutely fine. I can't believe it. That's brilliant what you said, the private, public, and criminal sectors. Brilliant. Yeah, I think that's a great, just partitioning up what we're facing.
Yeah. So many voices would also help to then fight corruption. Sorry, I just lost my track. But yeah, many voices, a multi-pronged approach to fighting corruption would be the best way forward. And again, I hope you are not tired of hearing the same phrase over and over again. That now let's not just looking at corruption merely as a violation of criminal laws, but also put a human face to it. Back in Zimbabwe, in other countries, you would hear that, $4 million is missing from the treasury, but your money is still in your account. You don't see a victim. You don't think that you're a victim. Corruption is not a victimless crime. It does have a human face. Yeah, it is an extra tax on the poor. So we need also to fight it, because it will, in the end, it also harms us. So a multi-pronged approach through awareness raising to the communities, everybody, they need to understand that corruption also affects them in the long term. So that also can motivate members of the public, professionals, to desist from entering this criminal sector that I just mentioned.
I've got a very concerned attendee here. Kuda, was it Kuda Kwashe, is asking, the Panama Papers situation seems to have a worrying loophole. A firm can leak information on itself if, for example, it becomes aware that a whistleblower is about to disclose material information, or if they're being investigated, or am I being paranoid? Simba, do you want to answer that?
And I mentioned in the beginning, and I'm very
Yes.
glad I mentioned in the beginning, this is a field that is prone to anecdotes and juicy stories, really. Yeah. But there is a possibility. There is a possibility that a company can then just decide to leak. But in this case, in the case of the Panama Papers, we actually know who was behind the leak. So it was a consortium of investigators, investigative journalists, who helped to publish this information that would otherwise have remained
Undisclosed.
yes, undisclosed. Yeah. But nonetheless, there is a possibility that criminals can also try to rig. But yeah, well, I think there's the answer.
Thank you, thank you. I know we're running out of time, so I would like to get last points from both of you. But if I can just summarize what's come through from me, is the first G whiz for me was actually you need to classify the different levels of economic crime and not take a hammer and think all of your problems are nails. You need to classify them and use appropriate tools for the different types of economic crime that you are faced with. So that, I think, was a big one for me. The addressing culture has certainly come through, is that, and it also doesn't matter what tools, who has what tools. If the culture is incorrect, then you're going to be using your tools, even if it is an email about a Nigerian prince that wants to leave you lots of money, or it's very sophisticated hacking, and phishing attacks on your systems. It could just be an email system, or it could be some sophisticated software that's actually, penetrating your system. So it doesn't matter what technologies you have or how much education you have. It's the culture that sits behind it and the ethics of it. Are there any, and I know I've got a couple of other points, but let me just ask you, Simba, is there any last words you'd like to have just to add to that in terms of what would you like to leave people with?
Well, that's very philosophical one, really.
It is.
Well,
Or I'll leave you for a minute. Let's go to Anthony then.
I got it, really. Yeah. So, yeah, fighting corruption, as you see, I think those who are probably familiar with this, there's only one way. Every January we get this Transparency International Corruption Perceptions Index. Perceptions, not real corruption. But we hear that, Somalia, usually it's Somalia and North Korea perceived to be the most corrupt states beyond any redemption. Then we have the Nordic countries on top is the cleanest, that they don't need anything. Yeah, they are fine. But the point I want to make here is that we see, if you are now observing, you go deeper to a more observant reader, you will notice that in the past few years, especially since 2020, when we had the pandemic, even those traditionally stronghold countries, they are also backsliding. Yeah. So, which means everything that we have been using to fight corruption has not been working. Yeah. All the treaties, all these other domestic codes, etc., they are not working. We really need to come up with something innovative, something new. Let's take the fight against corruption from the domestic plan to the international plan. Let's support international mechanisms to fight corruption. And also, unfortunately, I can quickly put the link in the chat. Let's support the creation of this international anti-corruption court that will take the fight against corruption from those who are in power and corrupt and don't want any forms of accountability, to a space where that is neutral, that will probably be able to deal with corruption in a neutral way and more effective way. So this is my last point. Support the International Anti-Corruption Court. And I'm going to put the link. straight away.
Thank you so much, Simba. So, I mean, it's as you said, it's a collective effort. And although we have got mechanisms like Anthony mentioned, the whistleblowing mechanisms to, promote transparency and anonymity for whistleblowers and these protected disclosures, and we have blockchain for procurement, we have got the means to do this and to use these technologies. Do we actually have the will to use it? And that's what you're saying, is that the very organizations that are doing the purchasing of those systems are not necessarily wanting to purchase the systems and implement the systems that are self-regulating. So that's another point that we have there. Thank you for that. Anthony, from your side, any last points you'd like to leave with people?
One, we need to change the things we do at home. I took it upon myself to not pay chocho or to buy a cold drink to traffic officers. I will not circumvent a process for my own end. If we can start inculcating that to the next generation, they will probably grow up with a keen awareness of what is right and what is wrong. So somewhere along the line, as a people, we lost sense of what's important. And ultimately, we looked at material wealth as defining who we are. That's what breeds corruption for me. So let's get back to the basis. Thank you for having me. I just have an urgent matter to attend to.
That's fine. Thank you so much. Thank you, Anthony, for joining us. Thank you so much, Simba, for joining us. And thank you to everybody online for joining us today. It will all be summarized. So thank you for thanking me for my summary, but my summary was by no means comprehensive enough. It will be summarized in 8 or 9 frequently asked questions. It will be posted to the same registration page. It's our event page, which the registration page that you registered on will include the recording as well as a podcast style summary. It's generally about 15 minutes where you can listen to this again, but in a summarized form. And then it has the 8 to 9 frequently asked questions that will summarize our discussion today. So please, everybody, head over to the web page, the registration page, head over to our YouTube channel, like and follow, subscribe. We also have the Spotify channel where our summary podcasts are posted. Thanks everyone again for joining us today. And thank you so much to Simba and to Anthony for joining us today. Simba from Indonesia and Anthony from South Africa. Thank you so much, everybody, and have a good week.